I look back on American Idol with a lot of fondness. I know not everyone that comes out of it does necessarily, but it was such a defining moment in my life, especially because my story as a blind person and just overcoming disability resonated in so many different parts of the world where people were just excited to see a guy with a white cane on television. It started some conversations about disability awareness. And
Scott and Christina MacIntyre are my guests today on CIA, Contagious Influencers of America. From the producers of Keep the Faith, I'm David Sams. Scott, of course, is a American Idol alum. We all followed him that season that he was on, and he's going to talk a little bit about that. Of course, we've had him on before, so a lot of this is new that we're going to talk about, simply because we live in these crazy dark times, and we need a little bit of encouragement, a little bit of hope. And Christina and Scott got together and they decided to do just that. They're doing a new podcast called Enduring Hope with Christina and Scott MacIntyre. And it's available now wherever you get your podcast. And you can find out more about it, as a matter of fact, at scottmacintyre.com. That's Scott, MacIntyre. So make sure you check that out. Scott, he's been talented since the day he was born. I mean, he was a classical pianist before he got to American Idol, but he's also blind. He was born blind, so of course that created many obstacles. But the other thing is that he's had not one, but two kidney transplants. And he's going to talk about that, and it'll be great encouragement for those of you who are going through something similar or fighting some kind of something's gone wrong in your body, and you just think that there's no hope. Well, Scott's going to give you that hope that you've been looking for. And the wonderful thing is that his wife has been there. Christina's been there since day one with this fight over the last 10 years with the kidney transplants. And together they're the dynamic duo. They're just amazing people. So really do check out their podcast. It's called Enduring Hope with Christina and Scott MacIntyre. And do check out this interview that I did with this wonderful couple. Scott and Christina, welcome. How you doing?
Thank you. We're doing well.
Hi, thanks for having us.
It's good to be here with you, David.
Wow, it's been a while since you've been here at the homestead in the studio. What's it been? 3 or 4 years, probably.
I think it's been about 3 years. Yeah. We're glad to be back. You had us back.
Yeah, well, every once in a while you get invited back, and I couldn't wait to have you two back. It's been a while, and I got to catch up with you, and I got to find out why the heck you moved. I mean, that's the first thing I got to find out.
We wonder that sometimes too.
Yeah, we left sweet Franklin, right? It's we thought we'd be in Franklin for forever, honestly, or for a long time, until God calls us somewhere else, and sometimes He does call you elsewhere. And we were called out of. We felt really called to go into full-time ministry, and so it was quite a transition with a lot of layers. But we really stepped out of the music business a little bit. And when people ask us what we do now, if they didn't see me on American Idol or they didn't, they don't know me, it's kind of fun to answer that because, you can go a little esoteric with it and be like, I point people to Jesus, or you can, I could say musician or speaker, all the normal things, but we decided we're musical missionaries. That's what we say. We're musical missionaries, and we see a lot of young people struggling. And every time we speak in a school or in an assembly or what have you, just, these kids struggling with depression and suicide and just all these different thoughts. And we also know that music has a way to really reach where words alone cannot. And so we're trying to take music and take the arts into places to meet the needs of the vulnerable and people that are hurting.
So we didn't realize that by moving to Arizona, which is where we are now, we'd actually be doing more music, but that was the path God had for us.
Yeah, it was just kind
of. So let's rewind just a little bit here. I want to go back, and I want you to let's tell folks really where it all began. Tell me about your your families, what your parents were like, and coming up, and how you guys came together. So let's start from the very beginning.
Okay, well, that's always a great place to start, I guess. So Scott and I actually met in 2003. So I'm going to date ourselves a bit here, but I was 14 and he was 17 years old, and we were in a church production of The Music Man. And we were just friends in high school for a while, and then started dating, and we got married in 2011. And so we just celebrated our 10-year wedding anniversary, which
August
was
18th, which was awesome. Yeah.
pretty special. So we had that blessing of being friends as young people and really being in a part of each other's lives a lot before we got married. But we've really enjoyed this season that we're in now, and we have 2 kiddos. Christian is almost 5, and Stella she just turned 1 actually.
Yeah, it's been really cool, David, just to see how they watch us and what we're doing in daily life. I mean, Christians come to so many churches with us as we've ministered, and Stella's just kind of starting to realize what's going on. But the older I get, and especially kind of stepping out of the business world a little bit, I still have a foot over there, but just being more intentional to kind of get off the artist pedestal and minister to people in relationship. I see our public lives and our personal lives coming together in a way, because we can be telling people about Jesus over there halfway around the world, but then we're sitting at the breakfast table and we're telling our kids about Jesus. And I think when you have kids, as you know, you're way ahead of us in that. So we can learn a lot from you, but it just brings those worlds together. It helps you be vulnerable, and that's what we want. So
you two met, and how long did you date?
So we were getting off the Idol tour, and then I called Christina up late one night, and I kind of forgot about the time change. I was in Hawaii, she was in LA, and but she picked up. And first I asked if she was seeing anyone, and she said no. And then I asked, do you want to go out with an American Idol?
I said, no, I'll go out with Scott MacIntyre, though.
It's like a movie, David. It's like, so she was very gracious to me. And looking back, I must have seemed pretty insecure about who I was apart from American Idol and music. And I'd always kind of been the piano guy, so, but she was so gracious, and we just learned a lot from each other in that time. And she has just been the love of my life ever since.
So, Christina, you just got to tell me, how did you get over the hurdle, and how did you feel about dating a guy who can't see?
Oh, that's a good question. I think part of it for me is that we had known each other for so many years that it was just very natural. It was, not something I really gave a lot of thought to. Scott, the blind guy, it was more, like he said, Scott, the piano guy. So there were definitely some questions and doubts that we had to talk through, as we were moving along in our relationship. But I think I was just so confident in who Scott was as a person and his love for the Lord that, I definitely gave that over to God and just said, the things that I can't know right now, I trusted that he would lead us in the things that we would need to know. So, anything from, who's going to drive the kids when they have all the activities, how many activities kids have? and then things like, oh, Scott, can you cook a meal or something? So,
yeah.
Now, my biggest concern would have been, Scott, can you change diapers?
You know what? That was a big one. I will say that I think Scott had a little bit of trepidation about that, but he got over it pretty quickly. So that's good.
Yeah, I've changed a lot of diapers now. I'm rounding the bend on that. But that's kind of scary, David. You're feeling, you can't see what's going on. It's a wild...
but you can certainly smell dirty diapers.
Yes, you can smell.
Yes,
but that's
that is true.
That's more of a general sense, but you don't know when you're going in there. It's like, oh man.
Gotta watch out. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I want to go back even further because I want to get a sense of your life, your lives as kids.
Oh.
And because Scott, I know you have an incredible background in music. As I've looked over and listened to your material over the years, and I've read your incredible story, and also the incredible story about your piano teacher's wife, I believe, who gave you a kidney at one point.
Yeah.
So I want to go back to there. Okay, let's go back to there and talk me through that and tell your story to our folks listening.
Yeah, there's a couple things, and you mentioned, growing up, I started playing piano really early on. I've thrown different ages out there. I think, people have kind of settled on he started at age 3, just dabbling a little bit. But you have to remember, I didn't have my sight. So the world was auditory to me, and I just loved the piano. And, growing up, as all the way to today, my musical journey, first of all, has been very interesting because God's continued to just narrow the focus of what I'm doing with music, why I'm doing it. And I started out as a classical concert pianist. That's what I grew up doing. I've played with a few symphonies back in the day, and it was Bach and Beethoven and all that. And then Idol, kind of put me in the mainstream, and I had a song above Lady Gaga for one day, I think, that was exciting back then. And then, but all along, all these radio DJs, all these even mainstream radio people that were not Christians were telling me, hey, have you ever thought about going into Christian music? And then a lot started happening for me in Nashville. And then I started leading more worship music. And I found that, maybe, God's drawing me to the heart of worship over just a performance. And then he took us even beyond that. And he kind of called us out of the music business and into ministry with music. And I've learned over the years, David, you can look at music as artful, but you can also look at music as purposeful. And I think everyone's, in one place or another on that spectrum. You have people like John Mayer. They're making great songs. It's an artful song. It could be about whatever. He's trying to capture something he's thinking. Whether or not you're in the same place. But it connects with someone. For me, I think Christina and I, as we've thought about my music and about the messages we're sharing as a couple through ministry, it all comes back to music being a vehicle, kind of like we are vessels for God to work. I want my music to be a vessel for God to work through. And so I've moved from it being more artful to it being really purposeful and really bringing people back to the gospel. So when I was 19 years old, kind of in the middle of that, still in my classical days, I found out my kidneys were failing, and I didn't know what that meant at the time. If I'm being honest with you, David, I really didn't want a kidney transplant. The doctors told me that's where I was headed. And I had a quality of life. It was not a great quality of life. I was on dialysis, relying on machines to keep me alive day by day. But I reasoned that if I were to undergo a major surgery, there was the risk, as there always is, that I could lose my life altogether. And I kind of just became complacent. I felt a little bit like, in my own pitiful way, like Jesus in the garden before he starts making his way toward the cross. Father, let this cup pass from me. But then God chipped away at my heart, and he brought me in his grace to that place where I could say, not my will, but your will be done, Father. And I have to tell you, I'm so grateful that I allowed God to walk me through that. Not that I had a choice, I would have died eventually, but it's so true. I'm so glad he walked me through that. And I'm so grateful for my kidney donor who gave sacrificially so that I could have a better life. Not that she could have a better life, so that I could have something better on the other side. And that really just made a huge impact on my life. So fast forward to when we were last with you, that first kidney transplant lasted for 8 years. And then right before we got married, in that time, we found out, Christina and I found out, that we were not going to be empty nesters when I needed another transplant. We were actually going to be newlyweds or shortly thereafter. And I was put back on the waiting list for a second kidney transplant.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's something else. And tell me about the donor.
Yeah. So, we waited together and waited to see what God would do this time as a married couple. And to our surprise, I got a phone call from Vanderbilt saying that a living donor had been approved to give their kidney to me. But the crazy thing was, first time it was my piano teacher's wife. This second time it was an anonymous living donor who had never met me. I had never done anything for her. And yet she wanted to save my life. So I went through that second kidney transplant not knowing who it was giving in this way. And I look at that, and I think Christina and I both, we just see the gospel so clearly demonstrated. Just like I was powerless to save myself physically until 2 times in my life, someone stepped in and gave me their kidney. We're all powerless to save ourselves spiritually, and yet Jesus steps in and he gives us so much more than a kidney, right? He gives us the greater gift of eternal life.
And Christina, how did you deal with all this? I mean, it must have been a real challenging time for you.
It was. We got to meet the donor 6 weeks after Scott's surgery. Her name is Misty, and she was 27 years old at the time. She has 3 wonderful kids, and we've gotten to know them. And it was just incredible because, she not only gave us Scott's life back, but she allowed us to create new life. And so, we were able to have our 2 kids, which we couldn't have before the transplant. But that year leading up to the transplant, I mean, it was definitely hard. There were challenges, health challenges, physical challenges, of course. But we also saw how God was working. And I think he really gave us the gift of really having a unique perspective while we were in the trial. The saying, hindsight is 20/20. I mean, that's very different now, post-COVID and all that. But that phrase, looking back at your life and seeing what God did, you can see how he was working, see the good that came out of the pain. But God really gave us the gift of being able to see the good that he was doing while we were still in the trial, while we were still waiting for that transplant before it had happened. And the blessing of that was that we were able to share what we were going through with friends at events, with people we came in contact with, and we just had that joy, just that deep joy that can only come from God when you're in the middle of a hard circumstance. Because let's face it, that transplant wasn't guaranteed for Scott. There was, it wasn't guaranteed that he would get a donor, that it would be a match, that that he would come out of the transplant alive. And so, we can't always wait to be joyful when we're on the mountaintop, when we're past the trial. But God really calls us, to find joy in the midst of trials. And honestly, I think, a verse like James 1, verses 2-4, I'm sure you've heard it before, but, essentially it says, consider it joy, my brothers and sisters, when you face trials, because your faith will be tested, and your faith produces perseverance, and let it finish good work in you, so that you can be mature, not lacking anything. And I think that was really what we experienced. We had that depth of faith growth, I think, through the pain. And it just gave us something so special that we still carry to this day.
Yeah, I think, it's one thing to kind of, you deal with your pain, you try to numb it, you try to stave it off, you try to just look to the next new day, or it's, there is hope beyond this if I can just get through this, that kind of thing, pick yourself back up. That's all well and good. And I've been there. I've said those things too. I've given so many inspirational speeches over the years. But that works until you have another hard day. And, I think what the Bible is telling us is that we can have joy in the midst of suffering. Not that there's joy, tomorrow when the suffering relents for a little bit. But, there's going to be pain in this life. And I sometimes wonder, if we're running from pain, are we running from Jesus in some way? Because remember in Romans 5, Paul says, he says, we rejoice in our sufferings. That's so interesting because suffering produces endurance, character, hope. And then you read, 2 Corinthians chapter 12 and those verses, and you almost get this picture, David, like Paul is happy about his sufferings. And I'm not sure I'm there yet. I've learned that God is working through my sufferings, but Paul, some of the translations say he delighted in all these different kinds of sufferings. And I ask myself, why would that be? And I think part of the answer is because Paul knew that somehow, even sometimes in ways we don't understand, suffering with Jesus always leads to hope. It always leads to hope.
So tell me what you've learned about navigating a detour. When you hit a roadblock, and we all get frustrated when you drive up there and you hit that sign and it says roadblock, road out of service, whatever, and you got to go through a detour, and you go, come on, my destination is right on the other side, and you're asking me to drive 20 minutes down the road and back?
Yeah.
How do you guys deal with that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because in life we will all face that. So I can start, Scott, but I think you have to go through those stages maybe of grieving your plan that you had, maybe of just releasing the plan that you thought you were going to move forward with, or, the way that you wanted things to happen. So I think, there's a little bit of just recognizing that, okay, God's in control, I'm not. And so now we just need to accept and find a new way. And I think that, you got to be realistic about just those stages of recognizing that, things are going to be different. And so you need to make different choices. And the one thing we all have control over is our attitude and the things we say and the way we present our hardships to the world. And so I would say that if you can kind of be mindful of those things with any trial or any roadblock, hopefully it will just help you navigate them with a better perspective.
And give me an example of a time that you had to deal with that head on.
Well, the first one Scott mentioned was when we were just a few weeks before our wedding, is when, the doctor told him that, his kidney was probably not going to last 20 years like we'd hoped, but it might last 1 or 2 more years. And so for us, that was a shock. I don't think we had known at all that the kidney wasn't doing well. And so we had to just trust God for things, even like when we made our move out to Nashville. We moved out there shortly after we got married, but that was a stretch of faith of going, okay, so we feel God leading us to Nashville for a time. But his doctors are here in the Phoenix Valley, and families here. So how does that make sense?
And my kidneys were failing at
the
time.
And the kidneys are failing. So, God, why would you lead us somewhere that seems like it's away from where the help is and where things are? But he led us to Vanderbilt, which has great care too, to Scott's kidney donor, to amazing church family, and all, everything we experienced there. And so, when it looks like you're going in a direction that maybe is worse, maybe it's better. And so you have to just, if you're following the Lord, then trust that his ways are better than our ways.
I think you hit it there, Christina, because I'm sitting here thinking, David, about 2 things, about the fact that God's ways are higher than our ways. We won't even, we might get a glimpse when we first, get to heaven, but I think it'll take some time even then to to begin to see that's what you were doing in that situation, God. And so I think of his, just how far above our thinking he is, if he is infinite. And then I think of identity and going through that time, right in the thick of, your music career and Idol and all that, needing a second kidney transplant. It'd be very easy to be frustrated. And I think as guys, especially, we tend to put a lot of our identity in what we do. At least I did. And that year of waiting for a second kidney transplant, God did a lot of work in my heart, teaching me that, okay, if God calls me away from music, I have to lay that down on the altar. And so I did get to that place where I would have been, I could have found just as much joy in serving God in a different way. Thankfully, he gave me more music than ever before to do after that. But I let go of that for the first time in my life, and really, one more idol was torn down. It's like I'm not a musician; I'm a Christ follower.
Your American Idol experience. Do you look back at that and look at that favorably? Now that you've had a few years to look back, is it something that obviously it was life defining, but is there anything that you would have done differently?
There's a lot there in that question. There's probably all things we would have done differently, but I don't think there's anything big I would have done differently. And I look back on American Idol with a lot of fondness. I know not everyone that comes out of it does necessarily, but it was such a defining moment in my life, especially because my story as a blind person and just overcoming disability resonated in so many different parts of the world, where people were just excited to see a guy with a white cane on television. It started some conversations about disability awareness and things I don't even know that are going on, but they're still going on around the world to this day. And it's fun to to discover them. And I had a lot of fun on Idol, David, but I will tell you, it never entered my mind that God was using American Idol to lay the groundwork for an evangelistic ministry. That just was not on my mind. And it's been a few years since Idol now. It was in 2009 when I was on. It was a much bigger show back then than it is now, but it really opened up every door, imaginable, as you know. But I was just happy to make music. I was just kind of going along doing my thing. But now God's called us into this new space, and we get to leverage the notoriety of American Idol and me being on American Idol, but even just American Idol in general, to share the gospel. And that is so cool to be able to use it in that way.
So let's talk about that, because let's talk about where you've come over the years. And I know that you've now started Scott MacIntyre Ministries. I want to hear all about that. And why the heck did you decide to cross over, so to speak? Why in the world would you want to become? Do you consider yourself a pastor? Tell me about your mission.
That's a great point, because people will come up to me, and if they didn't watch American Idol, or they're really young or something, they'll say, "What do you do?" And Christina and I decided we're going to tell them we're musical missionaries.
Which is true.
which is true.
Yeah.
And I don't call myself a pastor, although we are in seminary. Both of us are. And it's giving us a lot of tools as we're engaging with people. But David, in those years since American Idol, we really just went where we were paid to go. And so I've done, however many speeches for corporations like Walmart and Boeing, and I've motivated a lot of people. I've inspired a lot of people. I still get to do that from time to time, and we'll go and do that when people pay us to come. But we realized in that model, and even doing concerts and tours here and there, we weren't reaching the next generation in the way that we started feeling called to. Whenever I would be in front of an assembly of kids, almost, I would say the majority of the time, a 14-year-old, 15-year-old will stand up, and in front of all their peers, they will ask me questions about depression, about bullying, these difficult things about being treated differently, things that are really hard to stand up and voice in front of your peers, which are probably the ones bullying you. And there's something about my blindness that sets us apart as a ministry, I think, that gives us a unique opportunity to take down barriers and to really kind of get past, whatever, just race, social background, where you grew up, where you live. All of that doesn't matter when you're listening to me speak, because I can't see you. And so, and so, God's just called us into speaking to people's hearts. And I think they listen to me, I'm seeing, in a way that they might not listen to everyone. And so we wanted to be able to go and speak at more schools, reach the next generation, reach people that maybe business, wouldn't take us to. And so instead of just going where we're paid to go, now we raise the money to go where we can have the biggest impact for the gospel.
And how do you do that if folks wanted to look into that and possibly help your ministry out? How would they do that?
Well, you can go to scottmacintyre.com and you'll see Scott MacIntyre Ministries on there, and you can first of all just see all the impact in churches and schools, and then through television and media. But there's a way you can donate on there, and we're so grateful for that. We're grateful for all the people that have come alongside us and really sent us as musical missionaries, like we were saying, just to places we wouldn't be able to go otherwise.
You got to forgive me. I'm conjuring up these images of Donnie and Marie, okay?
Yeah.
Help me out here.
Yeah,
kind of tell me what you do when you get out there, the two of you.
Yeah, so we have a few different things that we do. A lot of what we do is, like Scott said, we go into churches and schools. So a Sunday morning service, we'll go in, we'll take part of the service, or maybe the full service. We'll lead worship. Scott will share testimony, and we'll lead people to Jesus. We'll do the same thing in a school assembly, in a chapel. The cool thing about that platform from American Idol is we actually get invited into public schools. So, mainstream universities, elementary schools, high schools, of all kinds. And, all it takes during a Q&A session is for a question about who's, Scott, who's your role model, or, what's your favorite song you've written? And that just opens the door to sharing the gospel. So that's a lot of the stuff on the ground that we've done. We've actually done that overseas too. So Scott went to Amman, Jordan, and was able to share with refugees and Muslims, Mandeans, all kinds of different people overseas. And the other part that we have is, like Scott mentioned, the media part of our ministry. So we do have a TV ministry, and we're launching a radio and podcast ministry too. So that's kind of the exciting brand new part of what we're doing. But we're able to share with people that we can't be in front of. So of course, the pandemic, so many things changed, and we're still going out in person. But the neat thing is if someone catches our TV special or sees us at a church or another event, they can follow us on the podcast and hear from us week to week.
Yeah,
that's fun. This podcast thing has really blown up, hasn't it? Tell me about your podcast.
We're so excited about this, David. So the TV special was called Enduring Hope, and the podcast has the same name. It's the Enduring Hope podcast. And we're excited about it because it's, up till now, people are seeing our songs, our message on television in all different cities and states, and sometimes overseas. We're traveling around the U.S. and sometimes overseas. But a lot of times we kind of come in and out. I spent 8 days over in Jordan with refugees, which was, a lot of them had fled ISIS. Christina was alluding to that. And even they found hope in my little story of organ donation and these people stepping in to save my life, because the commonality is, when you hit the bottom, when your earthly possessions are stripped away, that's where you can encounter Jesus. So we get to make a pretty big impact, but then we hear a lot of times that the biggest impact happens, in the weeks following our visit to a Christian school or a mainstream school, because conversations are started that allow students to open up and allow teachers to continue watering the seed that we planted. And so the podcast, I think, is really a way to connect all the different parts of our ministry. When people come into contact with us and their heart is stirred toward Christ, maybe they accept him for the first time, as we do see, or maybe, they're encouraged to keep fighting the good fight. We may leave and go to the next place, but the podcast is really a way where we can encourage anyone listening on a weekly basis to continue trusting Jesus no matter what befalls them. And so whether people see us on TV or at an event or people we just run into in daily life, we really wanted to create a space where we can go deeper, we can share scripture, we can really talk about, some of the things we've been mentioning here, but in more detail about what does it look like to trust Christ in the midst of suffering and actually let him leverage your suffering for your good and for his glory.
So let's dive into that a little bit because, there's oh gosh, I think there are about 2.5 million podcasts now. I mean, I think everybody has a podcast. So
yeah, the one you got to remember right now is Enduring Hope, right?
Yeah, Enduring Hope. Okay. And so let's talk about that. Let's talk about what Enduring Hope really means and why somebody should tune into it and what kind of hope are they going to get out of it by listening to it?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think, we all face trials in life. Some of them are really significant and some of them are just kind of daily annoyances. But the hope we have in Christ allows us to persevere and to have a perspective that allows us to not just wait for the trial to be over, but to really see what God's doing in the midst of struggle every day.
Yeah, I think of the rest of that Romans chapter 5 verse, suffering produces endurance, endurance produces character, and character produces hope. And hope does not put us to shame because the love of God has been poured out in our hearts through the Holy Spirit. I hope I'm quoting that right. It's a hope that does not disappoint, as you know too, David. And we can look for hope in so many different places. We can look for hope in our career. We can look for hope in our kids, in our marriage. But your marriage only is foolproof if you're married because you're trying to reflect Christ and his church. You're married to glorify God. It doesn't always work if you're married, to satisfy yourself. It doesn't even always, work if you're married to serve the other person because they're not always going to be worthy of serving as you see it. It doesn't even work if you stay married, because of the kids, because they leave one day and some people face hardship then, but it's all about Jesus. And so the hope that we have, like Christina said, in Christ is unfailing. And I think the more we see today in our lives in light of eternity, in light of, our citizenship is in heaven and we eagerly await a Savior from there, the Lord Jesus Christ, Philippians 3:20. It's that kind of mindset that allows you to live more effectively today in all areas of your life. It kind of takes the pressure off. You don't have to achieve every item on your bucket list because eternity is going to be so much greater. We're still going to work in eternity. We're going to create. We're going to, that doesn't stop just because we move to the next life. We're physical beings. We're spiritual beings. That's what I believe. But it's really living today in light of eternity that we're trying to zero in on with the Enduring Hope podcast and really help people face all sorts of issues with that lens in mind.
And I think, Scott being blind just gives him a unique perspective on enduring. I mean, every day he wakes up, he's still blind. He could let that get to him. It could be a downer. It could be something that he's constantly having to, overcome or find the right perspective on. But there are things in our life that just don't go away, whether it's an illness. Every day Scott has to take medication, and every 3 to 6 months we get a blood test and, pray for the best. But life's not perfect, right? And so just being able to persevere in spite of the difficulties, I think is one thing that we're really great at encouraging people to do.
I have one more thought on that, David. We can talk all day about how to avoid suffering, but what if you could learn to see your sufferings as blessings, every single one of them? What if you could,
Yeah, that's hard.
It sounds crazy.
I'm not there. It's hard.
But I think that's what the Bible calls us to. And so Christina and I still struggle with that. Mm-hmm. And we've been through a lot, not just the blindness and the kidney, transplants and things, but there's all kinds of trials in life. But what if you could learn to find hope in the midst of the suffering? What if you could learn to see the hardships through God's eyes and maybe a little bit of what he might be doing? That's just what we're trying to inch people toward in the podcast.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So let's say that somebody's listening right now and they've gone through this crazy last year and a half, going on 2 years here with this pandemic and, all of the people arguing over masks and getting vaccinations and then people losing people and people losing their jobs or not being able to pay their rent. And, people have gone through an awful lot in the last year or two. Some people have been literally lived in isolation. Others have, many people have stopped going to church. They gave up on going to church. They may have watched online for a while, but now they're used to not going. And so they don't have a community like they once had. Let's talk about how your podcast is going to help, for lack of a better word. Tell me why your podcast might help pull them out of a rut.
Yeah, that's a lot, and we've definitely experienced all those things alongside everyone, and it's stressful. So I hope that we can validate that that fear is real, that pain is real, suffering is real, and it's just part of being human. I mean, we've just kind of got an extra few doses of it the last 18 months. But I think that not only obviously the podcast reaches people who maybe choose to be home or have to be home or something. But God doesn't promise that life will be easy. So I just think going back to just accepting that this is reality. Sometimes, I feel like I'm just waking up in a Jack Bauer episode or something. Okay, 24 hours. Can this not be over yet? It's like a bad movie sometimes. But this is where we are. And so you gotta live in light of reality. So, things aren't what we want. People aren't maybe acting as nicely as they should be. People are maybe more afraid than they should be, or not as afraid as they should be, depending on what you think of all this stuff going on. But Christ says, in this life you'll have trouble, in this life you'll have hardship. But He's overcome that. So, I hope that while we can validate, the fact that fear is real. Like, Jesus doesn't want us to live in fear. So many people are just afraid of dying that they've forgotten how to live. And I think we fall probably because of our life experience on the spectrum of we have faced sickness, we've faced death, we've looked at it in the face. I had to come to terms at one point. What do I do if Scott doesn't make it out of the transplant alive? So we've come past that. So for us, we recognize that the point of life on earth as a believer is to love God and share Him with people around us. So we can't let anything stop us doing that. And I'm grateful for the opportunity we have to do it. But He really calls all of us, to go outside and witness with your neighbors. Satan wants us to be shut up and fearful and not share the gospel. He wants us to be so paralyzed by, hearing the news and scrolling Instagram and all the crazy things happening that, that we can't reach out to someone in need or to encourage them. So I would I guess our prayer is that that through us, through our ministry, through our podcast and different things, that we can just help people recognize that that fear is the enemy. Fear is really the enemy, and that the gospel can overcome that.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for accepting where you are if you're listening, because you got to operate from a place of reality. And sometimes it's so hard to let go of that, right? But I think there's something really comforting in knowing that Jesus, he came to earth in such a vulnerable way as a baby. But then He identified Himself with your sin, with my sin. The holy God on high identified Himself with our sin. He was baptized. He didn't need to be baptized, but He asked John the Baptizer to baptize Him to identify with our sins, though He had no sin of His own. And so I guess my point is, He knows what it's like to fear. He's been tempted in every way, you could argue that, the temptation of food is one of the strongest temptations. I know we probably go elsewhere in our minds today, but he was tempted with all the temptations of the flesh, and he overcame them for you. He overcame fear for you, if you're listening. And so all you have to do is put your trust in Jesus. He didn't just die for you on the cross. He lived for you. He lived the perfect life, the fearless life that you and I can never live. And so we just need to look to him for that. And we want to help people do that every week. And just remind people week to week with the podcast that you can do that. You can open your Bible. You can take a minute and just refocus your heart and mind on Christ and his glory and the greatness of what he's done for you.
So Enduring Hope is the name of the podcast, and I'm assuming you can get it wherever you get your podcast, which is every place now, right?
Every place. Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, and you can go to scottmacintire.com/podcast as well. You can find it there.
And be sure to rate and review and all that kind of good stuff, because that's the way people find out about these things. And let me just ask you, as we look toward 2022, what are you two looking forward to? And tell me, your kids are how old now?
Our kids are, our son Christian is 5 and our daughter Stella is 1. And one thing I'm looking forward to, actually, I think we're both looking forward to, is homeschooling. So we were actually both homeschooled growing up. We had great experiences with that. And it's something we've always considered for our kids. But I think the older we get and the older our kids get, we realize that, that is just, it's so important as parents to be the main influence in your child's life, especially in a culture that, rejects God and the Bible. So we're going to be homeschooling our son in kindergarten. And so that's one thing I'm looking forward to. But, as far as the ministry goes, we have a lot going on there.
Yeah. And back to what I was saying earlier, David, like just our public and private, American Idol created such a public, a public image, right, for anyone that goes on there. So I get that, but just our who I am on the stage and off the stage, I just want those to be the same. And I think, raising up our children is part of that. And we don't really, we don't say everyone has to homeschool or you're not doing it the right way. I mean, we know God leads people in all different ways, but I think the culture has just shifted so much, even in the last 5 years. And so I do, my heart goes out to people, and I think Christina and I do want people to be aware of what you're doing when you send your kids out of the home for most of their day. And I know not everyone is able to be with their kids all the time, but it's just a reminder of take the time to speak into your kids' lives, because it's a tough world, and it's actually become a world that is more and more, I think, just giving in to the enemy, and that it's seeking to destroy your kids, if I can say that, if I can be a little brutal for a second. And so we want to just combat that. And so God's leading us to homeschool, and a lot of people don't know that about us, but we turned out okay.
We did. We're not too weird.
Now, when you two go on the road, do you live stream these events, or do you are they on YouTube? How can folks see when you're appearing someplace?
Yeah, so all the dates, both in person and television events, are on scottmacintire.com. We try to post there. Obviously, we're on all the social medias too, Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and all that. But yeah, a lot of the events we do are live streamed. If we're going into a church, the church will have a live stream. And we love it, David, because people come into church that normally wouldn't be there. It's like, come see the blind guy from American Idol. And they...
Yeah, we've heard from people the last 18 months here, that ventured out to church for the first time in a while because we were coming out. And so that's always exciting to hear.
Yeah, we love getting people back into church. We love just, emboldening students to face their fears and all that. The schools are not live streamed as much, but the best way people can see what we're doing is the TV special. And we produced this TV special, same name as the podcast, Enduring Hope. We produced it in April of last year
of 2020
during the pandemic. And
yeah, it was kind of a wild experience. We had planned on doing it live in a church, and with everything that developed, it ended up we didn't have a live audience, which was fine. But God just allowed the whole project to move forward. About 50 people or so, kind of when everyone was still really confused and concerned about what was going on. But it was kind of a blessing to be able to provide that work for folks in the production industry when, everything else had been canceled.
Yeah, there were about 50 pastors and crew and musicians and people that flew out to help us with it to Arizona. And it was kind of surreal because it was right in the thick of the pandemic. And it was like a little, breath of reality for a minute there. But it's so cool. It's what we're doing with it as a ministry is we're airing it in new cities each month, and people's donations help us do that and help us bring the gospel to different cities and all of that. But if you're listening right now, you can watch it online. You just go to scottmacIntyre.com/enduringhope, or just go to the website. You can find it. But the TV special is really just, we wanted to capture what we do in schools and what we do in churches, but package it in a way that we could share it in places where we don't always get to be in person. And so there's a lot of music, there's a lot of encouragement, a lot of our story, even some teaching. We brought a guest pastor on that watched us grow up, so you get to find out the real story.
All the behind the scenes.
And
people can watch it online there.
You two are together all the time. You work together. You raise these kids together. You're together 24 hours a day. It sounds like to me. How do you do it? I mean, come on. I want to know your secret because it's never worked for me. I've tried. No.
You're not in the minority, David.
I think obviously it's unique. I think we have a lot of grace for each other, and Scott has a lot of patience.
Christina has a lot of patience. If you send me an email, David, and you only answer one of my questions, but you asked me, I asked you 2 questions and you only answer one, that really, really upsets me. No, I'm just kidding.
No. Scott doesn't get upset about anything at all. He's so laid back. But I think we just, I don't know. I just have to say, it just must be how God created us, because there's really no other explanation besides that. We tag team really well. I think especially, when COVID first started and we lost all the help you have usually, family and kids and all those things. We just learned to tag team. So we just switch off back and forth. We don't sleep much since we're also, in the graduate program at the seminary. But somehow we just find ways to maximize our time and do it together. I don't know.
And we have a lot of people that help us with the ministry. I mean, it's such a blessing. But I think the two of us, we really, it's a very rare thing, but we really enjoy working together, doing ministry together, having fun together. It's kind of bad, David. We'll go, we went out of town for a little bit on our 10-year anniversary trip this year for 2 nights, I think. And we have a hard time not talking about work and ministry while we're,
because it's so what's up?
We just love it. We love dreaming together. I think that's what it is.
True.
But
that's true.
I think other couples can have that to a degree, but it's just, I think when you think of the Garden of Eden, Eve was helping Adam. They were working alongside each other. I don't know when we developed this thing of you have your career, I have my career. Not that that's bad, but I just, I see so many people, they get 5 minutes together. That's hyperbole. In the evening. And how was your day?
Yeah.
How was your day? Well, they're living a life they'll never be able to share the majority of with their spouse, all the little details. And sometimes that's how it's got to be for a season, but we feel so blessed that God's just united our hearts in that way.
Yeah, I think that's true, because we don't have to spend our time asking about how was your day, what'd you do. We can have that vision and dream together about things. So I will say, though, there are a few things Scott does that bug me, but it's so hard to remember. In the moment you can remember, but then when you try to think of it later, it's hard. But
yeah.
I'm sure you'll remember the minute we're done.
I know, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Well, listen, you two, it's been great having you, and I wish you much success with the podcast Enduring Hope, which is available everywhere. I appreciate you too, and I'm looking forward to really seeing how your ministry grows and how you reach a lot of folks who right now are absolutely looking for all the hope they can get their hands on. We all are, and I really appreciate you for stepping up and doing this.
Thank you, David. It's an honor to be with you. We appreciate what you do, and thanks for having us on and checking in. We're so excited about what God's doing.
Thank you, Christina. Thanks, Scott. You guys are so great. Thank you for sharing your stories and your inspiration with us. The podcast is called Enduring Hope with Christina and Scott MacIntyre, available now wherever you get your podcast. Do check out Scott's website at scottmacintyre.com, and make sure that you check out his ministry that he has at Scott MacIntyre Ministries, and you can read more about that online. That is something that they've had out for, I guess, a couple of years. They started that, and they're taking their message through art to schools and churches and television and the media around the world. And we really need to pray for them and really get behind them. So please do check out scottmacintyre.com. I'm David Sams, and this has been CIA, Contagious Influences of America, from the producers of Keep the Faith. Please do rate and review us. That would be just absolutely wonderful. And go out there and live that life in living color, because it sure is a heck of a lot more interesting than living in black and white. We'll see you next time.
Hey, it's Christina MacIntyre.
And Scott MacIntyre. I've sung this song, Safe in My Arms, in so many places. It really seems to connect with people, especially those who are going through tough situations.
Maybe you're facing disappointment or loss. Maybe you're struggling to find peace of mind, and you long to know that you are safe in the arms of Jesus.
There are so many passages we could read, but let's go to Jesus' words recorded in John 14:18. I will not leave you as orphans. I will come to you.
Sometimes God guides us to wise solutions that will get us out of tough times, and sometimes we just have to ride them out with the knowledge that we're not alone.
If you've placed your faith in Jesus, you are safe in His arms. In Christ, you are part of a heavenly family, and you are secure. Hold tight to that enduring hope. For more encouragement, visit scottmacintyre.com and follow the Enduring Hope podcast.
Paid for by ACT International.